This is going to be the first installment of a three-part webinar series that we're going to be doing today through Thursday, the unexpected outcomes of great ServiceNow SPM reporting and how to achieve them. So the first installment today is going to be primarily focused on project status workflows, the personas, pain points, and how to overcome them to get great outcomes from your reporting within SPM and ServiceNow. Tomorrow is going to be focused on portfolio and program specifically. And then Thursday, the final installment is going to be focusing on demand data. Now, there's a lot of overlap conceptually over each of the process areas, but little unique nuances about the data types associated with each problem that we're going to cover in detail each day. So just to get started, a little bit of background on myself and VividCharts and why this topic is so important to us. My name is Rob Walsh, one of the founders here at VividCharts, and VividCharts is a elite technology partner of ServiceNow. So we provide a data engagement platform that helps ServiceNow customers get the in-platform reporting experiences that they want and need. And one of the areas within the ServiceNow platform where we found a lot of success is the SPM suite. And one of the big reasons why is we focus on places where data is leaving the platform for reporting purposes. So we hear stories every day about customers pulling data out into places like Excel, PowerPoint, third-party BI platforms just to get the reporting outputs that they need and probably want in the platform. So everything we build is aligned to that goal of providing the reporting in the platform that customers are looking for. So we're going to look at today's the problem through that lens today, and specifically project status reporting. But more importantly, we're going to share some stories and really learnings from our customer base that what are kind of the downstream effects when you actually deliver great reporting in the ServiceNow platform. So let's actually start with the end in mind and just talk through the three primary outcomes we're going to take a deep dive on today. The first is more transparent project status communication that is available to all stakeholders. The second, acceleration of ServiceNow user adoption and enhancing the user experience for those actually doing their work in the platform, providing an easy button for them. And then lastly, quicker decision-making with unlimited sharing to business users. So those are the users that are not actually working in the ServiceNow platform on a daily basis, but are very, very interested in the data that lives in ServiceNow so they can make more effective decisions. And what's really important to call out about each of these three outcomes, and it's actually where we're going to start, it's the people involved, the personas that we need to have top of mind that we're actually going to be trying to drive the outcomes for. So when we think about the three personas involved in SPM reporting, we have portfolio managers on the left-hand side. So those are the folks that do a lot of data roll-up of projects, demands, programs that all have to be summarized in a really high-level strategic fashion for a portfolio. So the portfolio lens. The second is project and program managers who live at a slightly more granular level. So they own a lot of the data that eventually gets rolled up into the portfolio lens. And then finally, the executive team and functional leadership. So these aren't the folks that work in ServiceNow and actually update the data and manage it within the ServiceNow platform, but they're the folks that we really want to provide clear and concise reporting out to so that they can make more effective decisions, prioritization calls, et cetera, that are really data-driven. So when we think about these three personas and achieving great outcomes, we want to think about how do we give as much of an easy button to each of these three personas as possible for their role in the reporting process, whether it's actually updating the data or whether it's just consuming the data in a really easy self-service manner so that they can make more effective decisions. So keep these personas top of mind throughout the presentation. both when we're in the slide deck today and when we jump into the product. And I'll make references back to each of these throughout the presentation as well. The second thing we want to keep top of mind throughout the presentation today is the general phase that a project goes through. And this will have a little bit of nuance organization to organization. There's plenty of organizations that are running in a hybrid environment where they have a little bit of agile, they have a little bit of waterfall, but at a high level, this is directionally the phases a project is going to go through. So again, from a reporting perspective, we want to be thinking about how does the data look for each of these phases as a project cycles through initiating, planning, executing, delivering, and then closing it out. So keep these project phases top of mind throughout the presentation. We'll reference back to them as well. Before we take a deep dive into each of the specific outcomes, let's take a look at just, a classic project work breakdown structure and kind of start to look at it through the lens of those personas that we started with. At the very top, we have stakeholders who have very different communication requirements than those further down the structure that are actually performing the work at the task level, or from a project manager seat, they're actually sitting right in the middle of those two things. So they're making sure that the task level details are not just getting done, but staying current from a data perspective in the ServiceNow platform or whatever platform you're using. And then making sure at the top level, they have a report out that communicates status updates to those stakeholders who don't necessarily need individual task level detail on everything, but they need a summarization, and that's the project status report. So we're going to reference back to this a lot throughout the outcome discussion today as well, where we're thinking about how do we align everything in the process so that the data happening at the task and subtask level can surface up to the project manager level, who sits in the middle, and then provide a clear and concise update up to the executive and stakeholder level. And we have a more detailed picture of this that we're going to look at and actually share out in the deck coming out of the session today. But as you think about that task level up to the executive level, what are some of the pain points that happen around just communicating updates around what's going on with a project? And always remember, this is where the work itself is actually getting translated into data, getting updated so that it can actually be communicated up to those that aren't working at the task level. So on the one end of the spectrum, like on the previous slide, the very task and subtask level, you have the resources performing the tasks. And they're interpreting strategy at kind of a second-hand level. They're interpreting it through what they hear from their executives, what they hear from their project manager, and also what they can just intuit out of the tasks that they're actually performing. As we move further down that continuum towards the decision makers, there's a lot of folks that are working in the ServiceNow platform, performing tasks and actually updating data on a consistent basis, and hopefully doing that very consistently so that the quality of the data in the system of record, ServiceNow, is staying up to date. And when we hit this center point, this is where a lot of the friction happens, because you want to count on the task level data getting updated consistently. But when you have to start taking that task level data and starting to distill it down into a status update that is interpreted by decision makers, this is where we see a lot of manual deck creation happening, and maybe happening for multiple audiences in the organization. And by far the most common pain point and output here is just a project data getting copied, pasted into a PowerPoint slide template, maybe an Excel slide template that either gets sent out individually to project stakeholders, or it gets sent out as a part of a large deck that goes out to all stakeholders on all of the projects that are taking place at the organization. Now, as a result of this, we see another pain point that takes another step over to the right here. with all of the copy paste that's happening going into PowerPoint, we actually see quite a bit of variance in the reporting formats that are used. So if you're a stakeholder for a project, you may get two different styled updates from two different project managers, right? So you're having to assess data in different formats, which adds a little bit more time to consuming, distilling the information down so that you can make a decision or ask a question. Okay. And then at the highest level, as we start to bubble all of this information up, we see a similar problem on reporting roadmaps at the highest level. So we have project status updates that go out for an individual project, but then we also have roll-ups that are intended to communicate, here's everything that's going on in a given program or portfolio, and kind of painting that roadmap picture for decision makers. And we see this same problem playing out there where we end up in PowerPoint a lot of the times for those kind of report outs. So for today, again, we're going to focus on project status specifically, but tomorrow in the portfolio and program section, we're going to discuss road mapping in more detail. But again, this is a deck we're going to send out coming out of the sessions this week, but want to paint the picture of this continuum where we're starting to see pain points when it comes to keeping the data up to date and actually getting the report outs that executives and stakeholders are looking for. So now let's take a look at each outcome individually and start to dissect it a little bit more. And then after we go through each of these, we're actually going to step into the product and have a look at, how do we take away some of these pain points and barriers to great SPM reporting and achieving some of the outcomes here and the benefits listed on the slide. So the first one we're going to take a deeper look at is more transparent project status communication that's available to all stakeholders, not just those that are working in the ServiceNow platform. So let's start on the left-hand side and we'll just look at the current state. And the current state here, you can kind of just view as an inverse to the outcome, right? So what are some of the barriers to achieving this? Well, non-platform users are relying on push reporting external to ServiceNow. We already touched on that a little bit. If you're a stakeholder of a project, most likely, and we hear this from customers and prospects all the time, you're probably just receiving a push email once a week from each project manager for each project you're a stakeholder of. That includes an attachment, a PowerPoint output that's probably produced manually. So you're getting a push notification. There's not much self-service to get that transparency that you're looking for. The second barrier, reporting only available during set cadence meetings where you're actually getting presented to, or maybe just a set cadence where it comes in via the email inbox, like we mentioned. So a common example of this would be a steering committee meeting where you're getting presented a deck, but outside of that meeting, you might not have access to the data in between that cadence. So how do we remove that barrier and create more transparency for all stakeholders involved? And then decision-making is slow due to this bottleneck of data. Every time there is a manual intervention between the system of record and the reporting output for your stakeholders, that's a bottleneck with the data, right? So when we think about achieving these outcomes and providing great SPM reporting, where do we remove these data bottlenecks so that we give an easy button for each of the personas involved? The project manager, just update the data in ServiceNow. The portfolio and program owner, all you need to do is keep the data current in ServiceNow, define your template, and then you have your report out for the steering committee or project status. And then for the stakeholder, how do we provide a really easy self-service place for them to consume status updates or other data and assets on reports that are or projects that are in flight? So when we think about this middle section, the tools needed to achieve this, and we're going to show this a little bit in the product today. This is what inspires what we build on a daily basis here at VividCharts: templated status reporting that's always available, automated, and live. Core to that is a reporting platform that's native to the ServiceNow instance, and that's very intuitive to use, and it's cost-effective solution that scales reporting accessibility, right? So again, how do we provide the easy button for the project manager, program manager, portfolio owner, and the stakeholders involved? And when we align all of these incentives, like we're going to show you in the product, these are the benefits we hear, right? Eliminate the resource hours wasted either building the reports manually in PowerPoint, or from a stakeholder perspective, actually going in, fetching them out of your email inbox in between those reporting cadences, searching back in the email inbox to find it, right? How do we eliminate that wasted time with an easy button? And making data available to all stakeholders at any time, right? So decisions happen outside of those typical reporting cadences. So while it's really important to have an event like a steering committee meeting or a weekly update on status for a project, data and decisions can be or data can be used to drive decisions in between those cycles. So how do we make the data available not just for those set cadences, but also in between those cycles, so it's easy and self-service for all those involved? So let's step to outcome number 2, acceleration of ServiceNow user adoption and enhancing the user experience of the platform. And this is one that was actually a surprise to us. When we started with this process area in the ServiceNow platform, we were hyper-focused on just save the resources time. If you can give project managers time back in their day, that's a win, and that's enough right there. But what we actually found is maybe more impactful when you do automate that process for the user is you're going to incentivize them to actually adopt the platform that you've invested so much in by giving them a better user experience. So, ServiceNow users are having to manipulate data outside of the platform. That's not a great incentive to keep the data up to date in the system of record itself, right? When you're doing the reporting outside of the platform, the reports are stale as soon as they're created, right? So how do we create an incentive that leaves everyone driving towards as real time as possible when making updates to the data, but also consuming the reports? And, to summarize, there's not a good reward for data quality. Swivel chair data entry in Excel, PowerPoint, and ServiceNow does not create a good incentive to adopt the ServiceNow platform, keep the data quality solid in the system. So when we think about what is the tooling that we need to provide to create this incentive to just keep the data up to date, again, in platform is key. That can be edited to meet all stakeholder needs. So you need in platform, but you also need flexibility in what the report contains, what it looks like, what the layout is, and you need to be able to iterate on that over time. So we're going to show you in the product today how our editor facilitates that flexibility, but also gives the ability to standardize. And the second point here, flexible report templates that update with live data automatically. So this is one, establish the standard template, right? Apply it to the live data in the system, but again, leave the PMO and the organization the ability to iterate on those templates. And because we're in platform, we can iterate on those, refresh the template, and now we're showing more data out of the PMO, creating more transparency. And some of the benefits we see associated with this outcome, ServiceNow just becomes stickier within the organization. Immediate analytics pay off as a reward for good data quality in ServiceNow, and cleaner PMO workflow for reporting and communications. When you start to provide really nice report outs that everybody's proud of, you're going to get questions for, well, what else can we track? What other data points would we like to get in these updates? And that's going to accelerate your maturity journey in the ServiceNow platform. You're going to get asked for more data, and you want to bring that data in a structured way. So outcome 2, accelerate ServiceNow user adoption and enhance the overall user experience in the platform. All right, and outcome number 3, quicker decision-making with unlimited sharing to business users. So The barriers here, getting data to unlicensed stakeholders requires manual workaround, right? Why do we end up in PowerPoint? One, maybe it just is the aesthetics. Maybe it's the need to be able to email it as an attachment, or maybe it's because that user just doesn't have a license to come into ServiceNow or doesn't work in ServiceNow and doesn't really want to. So how do we make data and reports really easy to access for these users that aren't working in ServiceNow and maybe aren't even licensed? So no accessibility for real-time data transparency. We're going to show you in the product today how we can not just standardize the reports, not just make them easy to generate, but also make them easy to find for this type of business user. An in-platform reporting interface that's accessible to all users, which you're going to see here in a minute, and the benefits of this outcome, critical project reporting available in real time for all stakeholders to facilitate decision-making, right? All of this is going back to those 3 personas that we mentioned at the start. Give an easy button for each so that we can have good quality data that facilitates quicker and more frequent decision-making. That's data-driven, okay? So those are the 3 outcomes that we're driving towards in everything that we do when we think about how do we make great SPM reporting. So let me jump out of this window and we're going to step into the product now next, and I'm going to step through some of these concepts in the product itself. All right, so I'm going to step over, and the first thing we're going to look at is when we think about project status reporting specifically, the first step is standardizing the report output that you want for your stakeholders. So that incorporates 2 things. It's what data points do we consider critical on a status report, and what is the layout that makes it really easy to consume and consistent, right? So within the editor, we have full control over both of those things. So just from a purely aesthetic standpoint, everything you see here is drag and drop, where we can drag and place it wherever we need to on the canvas. We can resize in a format that is very, very similar to PowerPoint. So I'm a user who has no technical expertise whatsoever. I can come in and update this template with ease, right? So a lot of control over the layout as well as the sizing of everything. But what we can also do is control the aesthetics. So if I just come up here and select this project manager chart, I can do a number of different things on the aesthetics. I could add a title, remove a title. I could decide if I want the label on there or not, or I could update the size and color of the label. So maybe we want to update this and give it a black label instead. So full control over the aesthetics. And in the opening video today, you saw a number of examples on what this can look like with your own organization's branding. We have the VividCharts aesthetic applied to this report, obviously, but full control over everything aesthetically that we're seeing here. What we also have full control over is the data itself. So the project manager here, if I open up the data menu, is just pulling from a field on the project table. I could just as easily say, we don't really care about that. Let's put the program that this project belongs in. And just like that, it updates on our template. So very easy to configure from a data perspective, and also the ability to go to multiple tables in the system. So if I look down here at the key activities planned, open up the data cog here, you can see I'm pulling from the project status table and just referencing a different field, the key activities planned. Same thing goes for our key milestones here, looking at the project task table. Our RIDAC chart is actually pulling from all of the RIDAC tables, so related lists to the project. And then if I jump over to our second slide here, we're actually pulling list views of all of the risks, issues, decisions, and changes. So you can see we can have a really concise summary on the first page here, but often stakeholders still want the ability to get a little bit more granular. So it's nice to have a second slide here that provides that. So again, thinking about our personas, what are the data points we want project managers to keep fresh and high quality data in the system for, and what are the data points that matter for our stakeholders, and build that into our template. Okay. Once we have our template created, the next step in the process is produce this report template at scale for all projects in the system. So to do that, we leverage a capability of the VividCharts platform that we call summaries. So this is a summary that I built in prep for this webinar. But you can just see, if I go into our configuration menu, you can see I'm looking at project. In tomorrow's installment, we're going to look at program and portfolio. And on Thursday, we're going to look at this concept applied to demand as well. If I look at the next step in the process, you can see I have a number of templates loaded up here, but I have the VividCharts webinar status template already loaded here, but we have the ability to have multiple templates in our system. And then we're seeing a nice list view here, but sometimes it makes more sense to have a card style view, or something like a timeline that gives a little bit more detail on the start and date of the project. And then lastly, we have a couple of filters applied to this summary. We have an absurd number of projects in our demo instance here. So I have this summary filtered down to just a couple of portfolios. But what we can also do is filter it down to a specific portfolio. So I'll just choose the compliance, for example. And then we have a nice filtered list of the 2 projects in the compliance portfolio. So from here, as a stakeholder, as a project manager, as a portfolio owner, I can either look at the individual project status report for that specific project. And again, you can see we're in a VividCharts ServiceNow instance here. So all of the data is up to date, right? So the incentive is there for all those that update data in the system. Just keep it current, submit your status report weekly, and then you have an easy button to get this really nice, aesthetically pleasing report out for status. So we have the first page here for this specific project, and then we have the second page that's showing a little bit more detail. Now, one of the outcomes that we mentioned was, what if an end user or a business stakeholder isn't working in ServiceNow on a daily basis? Well, both from this summary interface as well as this individual project status template, we have the ability to share with specific users, groups, or roles, or we can toggle this share with all logged in users setting, which is going to just open up access to anyone who has a login to your ServiceNow instance. So you have to authenticate in, everything's nice and secure in your ServiceNow instance, but you don't have to have that ITIL or fulfiller access. You can share it out in that method. What we also hear, though, is sometimes we do need to get it in a PowerPoint output to either combine it with a bigger presentation that's taking place, or we just have a stakeholder that's a stickler on it. We meet many stakeholders who actually really like this self-service interface and the ability to present directly out of the system. But if we need to, we can download this individual status report to PDF or PowerPoint directly from here. Okay. So that's for an individual project here. But individual projects are not the only lens that we discuss projects through. Sometimes we want to discuss a group of projects. So in that case, I could actually grab these 2, create a set, and I'll just call this the webinar set. Click save, and then I can do 2 things. I could open this in the viewer, which is just going to take me to that same view we were just in, but it's going to actually build a presentation that shows me both of those projects, right? So here's project number 1, slide 1 and slide 2. Here's project number 2, slide 1 and slide 2. So we can get to the viewer in that way and start to bundle for steering committee meetings in a really easy to use way. But we can also create a view out of that set. So if we do, and this is bleeding a little bit more into that portfolio and program use case, but let's say we're prepping for a steering committee meeting. I need to present on the red projects, but then add a title slide. So I can easily do that in the editor here by adding a slide, adding additional charts from the library, chart templates that I have saved, etc. So again, that's starting to bleed a little bit more into that other persona, the portfolio and program style report outs. But again, these are all very, very connected and just goes back to what personas need what from a reporting standpoint. So for today, that's what we're going to show in the product. Again, from a product standpoint and a concept standpoint. Tomorrow, we're going to get into portfolio and program. But for today, let's jump back into the deck here and go back into full screen mode. The last thing I'm going to pull up here is just, we're not going to read through all of this in detail, but just want to show you how much detail we've gone into on these concepts. So this is a RACI chart we're going to send out as a part of the deck at the close of the webinar series that shows how deeply we've thought about the personas involved, the roles, responsibilities, accountability in each part of the process, and what are the pain points we've isolated around reporting where we want to provide solutions to help so you can achieve the outcomes we discussed today. Okay, so before we get to the Q&A section, this is actually a common ask in all the webinars that we do, so we wanted to include it here. We wanted to give a little bit more background on the product that you saw today, but also a glimpse into the future of what's planned and what's coming. So for context, VividCharts has been around for about 5 years, since the start of 2018, but we recently re-platformed our application to the ServiceNow Next experience. So this opened up a lot of opportunities for improvement. So the first lines of code of that were written just over a year ago in Q4 of 2021. We released the data engagement platform that you saw a glimpse of today in June of 2022. And that's where we started to release actually use cases that we saw customers building and implementing on their own. So the project app, which you saw a glimpse of today, but also the apps that you're going to see tomorrow and Thursday for demand, program, and portfolio. Now, we've also seen these concepts be extremely useful in the ITSM process areas, as well as for managed service providers doing QBR outputs for customers. So we are releasing apps for ITSM as well. And we have quite a few of those planned. The next in the queue are major incident and problem, which will come out next month. And then we have a lot of enhancements planned for the SPM suite that you're going to see the full view of this week. A lot of enhancements for the Gantt chart that's in the library that you'll see tomorrow, that we just released a few of them. We have more planned there. So a lot of enhancements and focus on the SPM suite. And anyone who attended the webinar today, if you have enhancements, if you have questions, again, submit them live today, but also more than happy to have a feedback session with you and better understand your needs. So with that, we're going to open it up to Q&A. There are a few questions already submitted, but again, continue submitting those. And then we just have a couple of follow-up takeaways to leave you all with coming out of today's session. So the first one, is the slide one created in ServiceNow, or is this an integration of a template with ServiceNow? This is a great question, and it really goes back to our philosophy at VividCharts is in platform first. So the editor that you saw me making updates to, while it looks a lot like PowerPoint, that's actually entirely in ServiceNow. So the template that you create lives in ServiceNow. It's built with tech that lives in ServiceNow. And actually, you have all the ability to present and share in ServiceNow while still having the ability to export to PDF or PowerPoint. So that slide template does entirely exist in ServiceNow. It's not an integration out to a technology that lives outside of the ServiceNow platform. So great question. All right, next one. Is there a limit to the content that can be displayed in the sections like key activities plan or last week's achievement? That's another great question. When we think about a project status report, you have this constant real estate challenge. right? How do we balance, making our project managers be very concise with their updates, but giving them enough space to actually communicate a good update? So there, that question is more of a real estate question. The chart itself is not going to limit the amount of content that it's going to show. It'll scroll, since you're viewing in the platform, it'll scroll to show everything that you submit. But again, it's a real estate question. So you want to allocate enough space to where, 90% of those key activities planned are going to be viewable in the space that you have allocated for it. So that's where it becomes really important to think about what belongs on page 1 in that nice one-page update, and what would make sense to include in a more detailed page 2 or page 3, which is what we see commonly used on those second and third pages, providing lists with more details. Okay, how do you compare this to Clarizen? I use Clarizen and I like the tool. Maybe I'm used to it. So I'd say the big difference there is VividCharts is a plugin for the ServiceNow platform. So there's a lot of value that comes with that, integrating SPM with other modules. But VividCharts is very tied to the way ServiceNow customers implement the SPM suite in ServiceNow. So that's the biggest differentiator there. Can this functionality be extended to other parts of the platform other than SPM? That is absolutely yes. We see use cases all across the platform. What you saw today was very SPM specific, but I did open up the chart menu. You saw a little bit of the editor. All of those charts can be applied to any data that flows through your ServiceNow instance. So we work with ITSM, ITAM, HR, any modules in ServiceNow. It's all just data. And this concept also exists in those other process areas. How do we get the data that's flowing in our instance in front of the stakeholders in the business? All right, next one we have here, on what applications can we find the template? So the template that you saw today is primarily looking at the project module within ServiceNow. Tomorrow, we're going to look and actually show templates for program and portfolio. And those areas by nature actually include project and demand data. And then Thursday, we're going to look at demand templates and the demand process area. Also mentioned in the roadmap slide that we have one app out in ITSM for change management today. So solution for pre-cab, cab, and post-cab. And then we also have apps coming out for problem and major incident, help desk, et cetera, throughout the year. Another one here, does this leverage the export to PowerPoint functionality released in the Tokyo release? This does not. It's and I point back to the overall philosophy of what you saw end to end today is how do we address the end-to-end reporting workflow for project status reporting? So go back to the personas, make the data or create the incentive to just input the data into the system, provide an in-platform interface where you can update the template easy as a non-technical user, no reason to get into the code, and then actually provide a viewing experience and a presentation experience in the platform. So stakeholders, PMs, portfolio owners can present directly out of the platform with real-time data, drill into the data if the discussion makes sense to do that, but still get to a PowerPoint export. So slightly different approach, different technologies used. So great question though there. All right, and a lot of good questions. I'm not seeing any new ones, but again, I'm just going to flip over to the next slide. Feel free to continue submitting there. Just as a few takeaways, already mentioned at the start, we have another session tomorrow focused on portfolio and program. We're going to show conceptually in the slide deck again, but then actually show you in the product how it translates. That's tomorrow. And then Thursday, we're going to do the same thing for the demand workflow. So coming out of today, if you have any further questions, book a live demo with us. I've got the ability to put together status reports, in just a couple of minutes that brand it to your organization. So would love to book a demo with anybody who attended and is interested in that. So feel free to get in touch for that. If you just want to give a one-to-one feedback session on maybe there's some things you didn't see in the product today that you want to just give feedback on going forward, very receptive to that kind of session as well. And then just stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter. We're doing events like this all the time for SPM, for the new ITSM suite that's coming out. So engage with us there. And then I'll just put a plug that isn't on the slide here. We're going to be launching what we call a revamped version of the Vivid Hub, which is actually going to be a way you can create a login as a user and just come in and see some of the examples that we stepped through today in the presentation, so that you can kind of get a sense of what it's like to be an end user of our product, but also do some internal demoing. So that's going to be launching very soon, and we'll send an exciting update out on that. And then we had another one here. Is there a limit to the number of pages? That's another great question. And this is something we learned from our customers. They do not want a limit, so there is not a limit. And that was an enhancement we added when we rebuilt our platform on that next experience framework. So we actually have customers that are MSPs that have 20 plus slide updates that are used in the same concept. So no limit there. Great question. With that, I'm gonna hang on here just in case there's any other questions that anybody in the audience submits. But if you are going to drop, just want to say thank you for attending today's session. Again, please get in touch if you want to book a live demo, one-to-one feedback session, learn a little bit more about the pricing or licensing, like the question input there. And then please attend tomorrow's session and the demand session on Thursday. Those are areas we haven't done as much presentation around, so we're really excited to share what we're seeing and doing with customers in those spaces. Are there limitations that can be put into place to limit the amount of slides, exports, thinking performance against the product? This is an area that's top of mind for us, and we put a lot of thought and design into that aspect of our product. So a little bit difficult to answer in specific fashion, but I can tell you, because this concept applies across the ServiceNow platform in different process areas, the MSP use case I mentioned, that is a really high data volume use case. So we put a lot of thought into performance impact of having a lot of slides, exports, et cetera. So that's a great question. And that's something I would recommend, book a one-on-one session with us and we can talk more specifically about it. But really good question. Appreciate that. And again, I'm just going to leave things open. If there are any other questions you want to submit to the Q&A, please feel free to do so. I'll keep the webinar open just another minute or so. I'm not seeing any more, but again, really appreciate it. If there aren't any more questions, feel free to start dropping, and hope to see you all tomorrow and Thursday for the portfolio and demand sections. Not sure if you've already answered, but can we restrict the access based on roles? So yes, that's a great question to address here live. In that sharing menu that I opened up, we did have the ability to do sharing by user, group, role, or that all logged in user toggle. So a lot of flexibility on how you can kind of govern access to this. Great question. And then copy of this recording going out to today's attendees. Absolutely, yes. We'll be sending an email communication out that includes the recording. Also, as the full series includes or concludes later this week, we'll send out all of the content, recordings, slide decks, everything we're going to send out. We want to share it all. So yeah, that's another great question. We'll be sending all of that stuff out. All right. I think that's a good time to call it. Again, thank you. I'm going to shut the webinar down and see you all tomorrow for Program and Portfolio. Thanks a lot.